So, Rebecca, one of the things that I did yesterday was I talked to our speaker about how incredible the students at Johnson & Wales are and what wonderful things we do here. And the fun part, Jamie, is that when he asked me questions, we talked about the grit part, but I had to translate what that really means. And the fun part about translating is we build up everything we can, but you guys actually go test the things that you're able to do in the real world. Does that make sense? And the one thing I'm not concerned about is your ability to be successful. Because at the end of the day, you've already had what you needed to be successful. You're just going to take the stuff that we've given you and apply it. Make sense? So the other part is how we do this within the College of Business. So we do a lot of things where you survive accounting with Mo and Marcia, and then you cry to me about, oh, can I at least get an override for this or that? And we need to do more of that, but we also need to focus on what you do really well, and that's your level of perseverance. All of us can't look as good as Tristan in his bow tie. I tried. But some of us are going to do really well when we get out there, and some of us are going to do amazing. We want to make sure we stay in those two categories. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tristan, but before that, he's going to introduce our DVP. I've known our DVP for just a little while, but one thing is very certain. The parallel paths that we lead to success are very similar. And one thing I do know about our DVP speaker is that he is probably the smartest person, right, Spencer? The most strategic, the most eloquent, good-looking, all the stuff that you need to be successful. But what I do know is that we all aspire to have his level of commitment to giving back to the next generation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tristan. You good?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Vincent Berkeley, who is our distinguished visiting professor today. He has an extensive history. I'm not going to be able to capture all of it. He has a lot of achievements. I'll try and do it the best I can. He's been the president of Berkeley Consulting, which services include diversity and business development, operational assessment, leadership and resource development, and strategies. He's also been the chief diversity officer and a member the executive committee of Compass Group, the North America division. He was the senior vice president of corporate relations for Burger King and the division vice president for PepsiCo Pizza Hut. He had the financial and operational responsibilities for 450 company-owned Pizza Huts. And that's just his professional experience. His community involvement is that he was the past national chairman for the board of Sickle Cell Disease Association of America. He was on the board of directors for the Orange Bowl Committee. He was the vice chairman of development for the 100 Black Men of South Florida. He was the chairman for the board of directors of Zoology for Society of Florida. And he was named most influential in Who's Who Black Charlotte. Vincent also has his Bachelor's of Science in Human Resource Management from Friends University. He's married with 2 kids and a grandson as well. And now I'll turn it over to Vincent Berkeley to tell you more about himself.
Well, thank you very much. Can I get this mic on even though I have a big voice? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm not quite sure I really need to be here. I was sitting in my seat. I read the quotes from all 4 classes of the business school, and just about everything I'm going to talk about, you folks are wise enough and visionary enough to have already said it. So I was very impressed sitting reading those quotes. But since they're paying me so much money to spend an hour with you, I think I'm obligated to to say a few things. So I wanted to set this up. I don't like, quote, preaching to people. I like interacting with people. So hopefully if this works the way I'd like it to work, is I'll spend 15, 20, 25 minutes, however long it takes, just kind of exposing a few points of view. And then I'd like to spend the rest of the time that we're allowed in an interaction. And that could be comments, that could be questions, that could be et cetera. And let me warn you, I am a frustrated non-college professor. And what that means is, if you don't ask me questions, I will call on you and ask you a question. So just be pre-warned.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you need your mic on, sir?
Oh, I thought I turned it on. I'm sorry. So if I did something wrong here. It says mute, now it says on. It's not on. While he's doing that, I'll keep talking. I'm sure you can hear me anyway. What I thought I would start with is my background. Now, you heard about my professional background, but I wanted to spend a little time telling you how I got to, those vaunted positions in the for-profit and nonprofit world. Can you hear me? A little better?
Yes.
Good. So let me tell you that my journey started, I came from a two-parent household. Both of my parents were professional who had good incomes. I graduated from high school in the top of my class. I went to an Ivy League school for college. I really had all the resources I needed in my early life, and I was able to start life with no college debt. Does that sound like the majority of you? No? All right, now let me tell you the real story. I come from a single parent household. Anybody understand the term latchkey? I was a latchkey kid because mom had to work 24/7 just to allow us to survive. We had limited resources. Not something I'm proud of, but it's part of my history. I flunked senior English because I was unfortunate enough to have the head of the department as my senior English professor. And I hated to read. I mean, I went home and there was nobody there to give me guidance. I'd go to sleep. And he had a policy that if you were one behind on a book report, you automatically failed that semester. I called his bluff for 3 semesters, and let's just say didn't work out. So he failed me for my senior English, and I had to go to summer school to get my diploma, broke my mother's heart. I was told by many people I'd be a bum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fortunately for me, I did something that many of you will not do, is I entered the military, not by choice. And through the theme of this discussion, I want you to keep focusing on this choice thing. I entered the military because I'm old enough that they were drafting back in the day and it wasn't really an option. So I got drafted. And probably for me, it was absolutely the best thing that happened in my early life. Why do you say that? Well, I was trained in the military as a computer technician. And when I got out of the military, I couldn't find a job as a computer technician, so I took a job as an assistant manager in a fast food restaurant. And I like to say the rest is history. I spent a 45-year career in food service where I thought I was going to be in the world of computers. But again, it wasn't by choice. It was almost by accident and by luck. But, and I correlate the next things I'm getting ready to tell you to your
2, 3, 4 years here at this educational institution. Here's what I learned in the military that I was able to parlay in my first job and every job I've had since then. And it wasn't math and science. It wasn't how to operate on a body. It wasn't how to be a rocket scientist. What I learned, first of all, was what I call personal discipline. I didn't go in the military with any kind of personal discipline. So I didn't have the role models. I didn't have the people pushing me. I was left to kind of make my own decisions when I wanted to make them, and I clearly didn't always make those decisions, those proper decisions. So the military, that's not an option. You either develop personal discipline or you get court-martialed and discharged. The other thing I learned in the military was social skills. You know, the military is thousands and thousands of people that you're interacting with, and you can't operate solo, excuse me. Next thing I learned in the military was leadership ability. And I'll get back to what that means. And then lastly, the fact that I had a logical mind. Now let's look at them one at a time. Let's start with personal discipline. Now, I assume that you already have some degree of this, or you wouldn't be in this room. You cannot succeed in a college environment without personal discipline. You need to learn how to manage your time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you know what the most important commitment you can make is? Anybody? Very wow. We're right. We're on the same page. Most important commitment you can make is commitment to yourself. Before commitment to anything else, before commitment to a job, commitment to yourself was one of the things I learned in the military. Do what needs to be done. Do what you say you're going to do, and treat your commitment to yourself as a religion. Because nobody's responsible for you but yourself. And if you're not committed to yourself, then no one else is going to have equal commitment. Social skills. Quite simply, the ability to communicate. It's a very, very key skill. Very few jobs that you will have in the rest of your professional career won't require you to communicate with another person. I mean, you could be a developer of games, computer games, but somewhere you're going to have to interact with someone else trying to convince them that your idea is a good idea. There are no, that I know of, silo jobs where it's just you and you. And so now is the time, and again, that's why I was so pleased to see some of those quotes, for you to start working on those, what I call social skills or communication skills. You can be the smartest person on earth and the best at what you do, but if you can't effectively communicate, you won't reach your full potential. Now, I have a personal testimony who some of the people in the room know that this is a hot button of mine. I have a relative who, shall I say, is an addition to my family by marriage. Dr. Robinson said he thinks I'm pretty bright. This young man could run circles around me from an intellect perspective. He graduated at the top of his class from Morehouse University. He has a master's in chemistry from Emory University. He's had 15 jobs in the last 17 years, and he currently teaches 6th grade math at a charter school. Now, love teachers, not at all trying to put down what he's doing, but his communication skills are horrible. Absolutely horrible. And everything he tries to do, when he gets to the point of having to communicate with others, be it peers or supervisors, is just not a skill that he was ever forced to develop. So that's why it's important to me to, encourage you to develop your communication skills. And what are you guys millennials? I get confused with these terms now. What are you now? You're millennials? On the cusp? Well, you're not baby boomers is the point I'm trying to make. And the message for you is social media is not social skills. So if you feel as though, I'm real good with Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter and all the other stuff, and I do all that. My colleagues who are my age say, wow, how do you keep up with all that? But that's just a part of my communications. So don't rely strictly on that you have a relationship with someone over the internet and think that's what I'm talking about. That's not it at all. I also have this is how one of the ways I have developed my own personal communications philosophy. Okay, everybody in this room probably comes from a different state, is a different gender, probably might be different nationality, might be different religion, might not be from the US, but I am convinced that as long as we don't have a language barrier, i.e. we can both understand each other, I speak English, I speak a little Spanish, etc., I'm convinced that I am going to find something in common with you and we will be able to carry out a conversation. That's just my own personal philosophy. That's how important communications is to me, that I probe and I'm asking questions and I'm trying to find, you like sports? We both have grandkids. We both grew up in New Jersey. There's a genre of food that we like. I'm going to find something that we have in common, and I'm going to parlay that into conversation. Okay, leadership ability. Now, leadership ability kind of goes hand in hand with communications. Now, before I went into service, I hadn't led a pack of ants in a wet paper bag. Partially because I probably wasn't given the opportunity, but I never took the opportunity. I wasn't a nerd, but I clearly wasn't one of the cool kids in high school. I didn't play sports. I was a mediocre student. So therefore, leadership opportunities just didn't fall in my lap. And I didn't go looking for them because I was happy to go home after school and, lock myself in and get something to eat and go to sleep. When I went to service, I still don't know to this day why, but leadership opportunities presented themselves to me. When I had a year of military training to learn how to fix computers, and by the way, as big as this room. They weren't the little things you have in your hand you call a cell phone, which is actually a computer. And as we were training, we had thousands of people that were being trained at the same time, and to augment the professional military trainers, they would take a trainee, i.e. student, i.e. myself, and say, okay, we're going to put you in charge of 12 people, and your job is basically to make sure that they don't do anything foolish while we're gone overnight. And then we're going to put you in charge of 12 times 6. So now you're in charge of 60 people. And then we're going to put you in charge of 12 times 7. So eventually you're in charge of 400 people. Make a long story short, for some reason I excelled at that military training, and I realized I really liked being responsible for other people. I have parlayed that naturally throughout my career, both professionally and from a nonprofit perspective. I like to take the lead. I like to be in charge. And the multiples of discipline say, the more people that you're responsible for, the higher you're earning income. I.e., the CEO, who's responsible for the entire company, or the CEO who's responsible for the entire nonprofit enterprise, probably makes more than the person who's manning the event. And that's primarily because their responsibilities are of multiple people. So I find that leadership, as you navigate your career, will be directly correlated to your earning power. So what am I saying? Find ways to lead. I'm not saying be in charge. I'm not saying be the boss. But I'm sure while you're here in this university, there are opportunities for you to show and develop your leadership skills, if you're not already doing that. Take advantage of it. You know, when you get out into, quote, the real world, look for opportunities to not only learn and grow from a leadership perspective, but to demonstrate to people that you have that ability. Logical mind, what does that mean? Throughout my first 18 years in life, I don't know that I really ever found anything that said, man, I really, really like that. Everything was okay. I was actually fairly good in math and science, terrible speller, wasn't very good, I hated to read. So it was just, as a matter of fact, why am I learning Spanish? I live in America. And again, this was 1,000 years ago before, hopefully none of you have that question today. But I just hadn't found anything that I got that aha moment. I went to service and I started with these computer things, i.e., computers are, it's not if, it's very logical. It's black and white. It either is or it isn't. And I really kind of said, ooh, this is pretty cool. And I realized that I really like things that are black and white, that are logical. So that became my aha. So the point I'm making here is find what gets you excited. You might not find it while you're here. You might not find it, the minute you walk out of these doors. But if you're doing something you're not excited about, you're kind of wasting your time. I'm not saying it's not a necessary evil. I'm not saying you might not have to do that. But work hard to find that thing that really excites you and motivates you. But you're not taking the military route. So your question, while you're here or soon after you leave, is, are you developing your personal discipline? Are you honing your social skills? Are you putting yourself in a position of leadership? And are you finding what gets you excited? So let's go back to my career quickly. I got my first job out of the military by accident. Fresh out of the military, I'm a, quote, computer technician, but there was a recession and computer companies weren't hiring. So I answered an ad in my local newspaper for this new fast food restaurant that had opened up that were looking for assistant managers willing to work 90 hours a week for no pay. I signed up for it, and that's how I got my start. Using the things I spoke to you about, I actually spent 13 years with my first job. Had a successful 13-year career, rose to lower middle management. The company was sold, so I was forced to change. Pay attention to this. My second job was this time in upper middle management. Again, in the food service industry. I spent 12 years with that company. Something interesting happened along the way, which you're already punching this ticket. If you'll notice, through my first 15 minutes of talking, I have not mentioned college one time. While in one of my jobs, I enrolled in a community college and took all the courses that I liked and avoided all the English courses. And got about 44 credits, and then I got promoted, and I got transferred, and I got a company car, and I said, I do not need college. So I stopped going. When I was with this second company, I had a very, I'm trying to find the right word, a boss who was much smarter and visionary than I was. And he says, I'm going to create this new job for you. I'm actually going to make you a vice president. I'm going to ask you to move to Wichita, Kansas, which is, remind me to come back to that point. But there's one condition. You have to agree to go back to school and get your degree. My first response was, well, first of all, I'm an East Coast kid. I ain't going to no Wichita, Kansas. Number two, I'm already making big bank. I got a company car. I don't need no college. But number three, he made it pretty clear, if you want to stay with this company, you will do this. So I actually moved to Kansas, enrolled in Friends University, got my degree in human resource management. And the moral of that story is the next two jobs I'm going to tell you about, if I hadn't done that, I would have never gotten those jobs. Because I would have never gotten those jobs. Even though I probably had the intellect and the experience for them, the fact that I didn't have, quote, the sheepskin, I would have never gotten those jobs. So to this day, every time I see this person, I thank them. But again, the second job, the company was sold and I was forced to change. Takes us to our third job. This time a 9-year career, but at senior management position. Company was sold again. So I took a package and I started a consulting company. Well, my wife helped me understand that I wasn't kind of making the kind of money she needed me to make to maintain the lifestyle that she was used to. And she says, you need to go back and find a job. And that brings us to Charlotte. So I came to Charlotte in 2005 for my fourth job. I was this time in the executive management position for 10 years until the company decided that I was too old and too expensive, and they suggested that I retire. So a couple of things here. There's a correlation to all these job changes I made. What's the correlation? Speak up, can't hear you. They weren't my choices. I waited until the situation arose. Now, God bless that I always landed on my feet and, quote, landed better than I took off. But again, I didn't manage my career. I let my career be managed for me. The reason that's important to you is I looked up a statistic. I had 4 jobs in 45 years. How many do you think you'll have? More than that. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics says that most of you, before you turn 40, will have 10 jobs. It says most of you will have 12 to 15 jobs in your lifetime. Now that compares to my 4. And one of the reasons that you're going to do much better than me in your career is because you're going to do a better job of planning than I did. You're not going to wait until there's a crisis to make that change. I want to share with you a few tests that I think you'll be able to use to know, and oh, by the way, if you don't have 15 jobs in your career, you're not a failure. That's just on average. I actually personally think that's too many, but I'm a baby boomer, so there's a difference. But I want to leave you with a couple of things, or I want to present to you a couple of things that I want you to consider to help you understand when is it time to go and when is it time to stay. I have something I call the 3-year rule. I counsel and mentor a lot of people. That's just what I enjoy doing. That's why, like I said, I'm a frustrated professor. And my 3-year rule is, it's like crops. If any of you come from kind of a rural farming environment, Year one, you plant the crops. So year one, if I'm a company, you're showing me what it is you can do. Okay? Year two, the crops are growing. So everything you did in year one, which was kind of startup, now it's starting to come to bloom. The strategies you put in place, the teams you built, it's starting to come to bloom. And then year three, you should be enjoying the crops. You should be harvesting the corn and cutting the flowers, because it's very clear that the reason things happen was because of you. So for me, the right cycle, minimum right cycle, on average is 3 years. I want to kind of understand how you did it. I kind of want to see the results, and then I want to be able to say, yep, Vince Berkeley is responsible for a profit being up 10%. The reason I say that is if you leave in the first year, you don't want to get in the habit of doing that, because no one can make their mark anywhere in the first year. If you leave in the second year, some people think you're running from a problem. Well, he wanted to get out of here before the stuff that he didn't work. The third year normally is enough of a cycle where I can say, Benjamin, that's on you. So that's one thing. When I counsel people, I say 3 years to me is about the right time before you should even start considering a change. I call the next one the I know it's time rule. What do I mean by that? When you get up in the morning to go to work, are you excited? Are you thinking about work the night before? Are you excited to, get in there and continue what you were doing? Are you being fairly, and I have that word in quotations, are you being fairly compensated? Now, none of us are going to make the kind of money we think we deserve or we think we should be making, especially when you're entering the workforce right out of college. But the key is fairly. Are you not being taken advantage of, and is it reasonable? And then lastly, and this one to me is probably as important, are you growing and developing? Are you every day learning something new? Are you being given challenging assignments? Are you receiving promotions? Those to me are 3 key things. And if the answer is no, 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 excuse my French, get the hell out of there as quick as you can. If the answer is 2 out of 3, well, evaluate. If the answer is 3 out of 3, you're probably okay for now. In today's environment, to maximize your compensation, you're probably going to need to change jobs. The reason I say that is most companies, they have this internal system of, quote, fairness, that regardless of how well you do, I can only give you X% of merit increase. And I can only give you X% in case you get promoted. Whereas external companies, especially with the talent war that's going on, will buy your service. They're not forced into putting you into a compensation matrix. If they think that Vince Berkeley can add value, they know what Vince Berkeley makes over here, and they're going to make it very, very attractive to Vince Berkeley to make that change. So periodically throughout your career, to really maximize your earning ability, I'm talking salary, bonus, stock options, whatever it might be, you're probably going to need to change jobs periodically to do that. And that brings me to a point that Professor Robinson and I talked about. One of the boldest things I did, and again, it wasn't by choice, was moving my family from the East Coast, where my wife's family, my family, everybody's from, to Wichita, Kansas. Like, why would I ever do that? You're going to have opportunities to take a bold step which will enhance your ability later down the line, which you're not going to see currently because you're going to be selfish about your own personal needs. Well, my boyfriend's here, or my mom lives down the street, or I've lived here all my life, or I don't want to leave Charlotte. If there's not a compelling reason, so let me start again. You are now at the place in your life where you should be taking risk. Now, not getting into your personal situation, but I'm going to assume most of you aren't married. Okay, I'm going to assume some of you don't have children, i.e. the only person you have to worry about is yourself. And if somebody says, I've got this great opportunity for you in Idaho, and I'm 23 years old, and I'm starting my career, and I've talked to Professor Robinson and other people, and they think it's an incredible opportunity with an incredible organization, and it hits the three things that I talked about. You're being fairly compensated. Matter of fact, you're probably going to be even more than fairly compensated because they can't get anybody to go to Idaho. You're being fairly compensated. You are excited to go to work every day, and you're growing and developing. Why wouldn't you do that? You got the rest of your life to live in Charlotte. You can come back to Charlotte when you get my age or younger, but don't miss out on opportunities, you know, at this stage in your life. So for me, while someone forced me to go to Wichita, Kansas, that's probably one of the greatest things I did in my life. I raised my kids in Wichita, and trust me, there's not much to do in Wichita, so they couldn't get in trouble. You know, I have some lifelong friends that I made in Wichita. I entered the fraternity that Dr. Robinson and I have in common in Wichita. There's just opportunity and golden gems everywhere you might go. So let me speed this along, like I said, because I really would prefer to talk to you. So, in summary, before I use the rest of my time to kind of dialogue with you, develop your personal discipline. Most businesses you enter will be people businesses, so develop your people skills, personal interactions. Find opportunities to lead at work in nonprofit settings and religious settings and social settings, and find out what excites you. One last thing, very, very important, and I'm a pretty, as I've become older, I've become very, very observant of my surroundings. On the short walk from the business offices to here, and then also once I got and sat in my seat, I was amazed at the interaction of some of you students with the staff. I wasn't expecting that. First name basis, how'd you do on that test, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I want to talk to you about is this thing called networking. I call it personal networking. And it's part of the whole social skill set. I had written myself down a question, which I've already asked. I was going to ask you, how many of you can say that you know business chair Dr. Robinson on a first name basis? Raise your hands. That's not enough. It's not, he's a busy man, but you need to know him. And it's less about for today, it's for tomorrow. You never know when you're going to need to pick up the phone and say, Dr. Robinson, this is Vince. Remember me? I was from the class of 2016. I'm considering this job opportunity. I really appreciate your wisdom and your experience. Just wanted to bounce it off you and let you know what I think. You want to have that kind of, and I just use Dr. Robinson as one person, but anyone who is responsible for getting you on your way in this school, you need to have that kind of, it can't just be, they grade your papers, they say you passed or failed, and that's it. These are relationships that you absolutely have to take advantage of. This is a unique setting in that you have a staff who is paid to help you achieve, but who truly cares about you as a person. Not a lot of colleges are like that. Some are so big, with classes of 400 or 500 that the professors and the administrators couldn't do that if they want to. You have a setting where they can. You will find people in your life like that. Make them a part of your personal network. Nurture these relationships. People you can call for counsel and advice. But like personal discipline, guess who's responsible for those relationships? Wow, quiet group. Who's responsible for your network and those personal relationships? You guys, not them. Because Dr. Robinson is going to have 200-300 of you again next year. And he's not going to be able to keep up with 200-300 year after year after year. But if you take the time to reach out, just want to let you know how I'm doing. Merry Christmas. How's your daughter doing? That's going to permeate with him. So therefore, when you do need to make that call and you do need that advice, you'll be one of the calls that he'll respond to. Lastly, as you get a little more seasoned and these things become secondhand to you, you have the same accountability that all of us do. And that's what I call play it forward, or for you. You should be nurturing, counseling, and guiding. It could be your younger brothers and sisters. It could be people who work for you. But take that personal responsibility to say, just like someone helped me to get to where I am, I need to take that same responsibility for them. Now, I could go on and on and on, but Dr. Robinson told me I only had an hour, and he would punish me if I used more time than that. And I would like to use the rest of my time to build some personal relationships. One quick story, and then I'll shut up, just to tell you how this works. So I used to work for a company called Compass Group. And Compass Group has a relationship with Johnson & Wales primarily on the culinary side. I had a relationship with the chair of the business department at Providence. And he asked me, not once, but actually twice, to be distinguished visiting professor in Providence, which I was more than happy to do. He assigned 2 young ladies to me to kind of be my chaperones and make sure I got to be where I needed to be on time, etc. One young lady I kind of lost contact with because she was just going through the efforts. The other young lady, to this day, and this has been over 10 years ago, we still have a relationship with. She just got married, she just had a child, she just re-entered the workforce. But the point is, she's part of my personal network, and it wasn't because of me. It was because she, and now I'm going to go back on one of the things I said, social media makes it much easier today. So while we don't rely on social media, that's kind of how we communicate, how we keep up with each other and what's going on. But we don't just do social media. But the point I'm making, 10 years ago, in this same exact setting, I developed a relationship with a person, and to this day, have gone forward with that. So with that, I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to...
With leadership comes adversity and failures. In your 45-year career from draft to corporate strategist, have you ever had an overwhelming failure or adversity? How did you persevere, and what is your advice for failures and adversities? How can we learn from them?
Sure. Let me answer it in 2 ways. So let me just talk about failure first, and then I'll go back and talk about failure specifically in diversity. Sometimes failure happens and you don't know it's happening, but somebody else recognizes it's happening. This whole college thing I told you about, have you ever heard of the Peter Principle? Okay, the Peter Principle basically is you're given more responsibility than you're ready for before you should get it. And it's called you petered out, or you have Peter Principle. Well, because I'm a good-looking guy, and I'm sure they wanted to say we got an African American who can do X, Y, and Z, let's just say I got put in a position I clearly was not ready for. It was a position for several $1 million business. It, called for being a strategist and sharing with senior management how you're going to move the business forward. And I was spending all my time making sure my PowerPoint slides were pretty. And so my boss at the time recognized this failure, and that's when he, quote, created this job and said, I'm going to give you this job, but you got to agree to go back to school, etc. Make a long story short, he threw me a life preserver, and it wasn't until years later that I realized that I was failing and someone had reached out for me. So you're not going to succeed at everything you do, but you can't be petrified by it. And if you've built the kind of relationships that you should be building, people are going to help you understand your shortcomings before they become critical. Now, from a diversity perspective, and I'm going to take you way, way back. Back when I was in the military and I was put in charge of these other trainees who technically were the same rank I was, we were all trainees, but I was in charge. I had a group who decided, well, we're not going to abide by the rules. We're going to do what we want to do, i.e. we're going to come in when we want to, even though there's a curfew, because we're brothers. And finally, I had to put my success in front of our relationship as brothers and bring the hammer down. I got called Uncle Tom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it was something that I chose I needed to do because, again, I'm the only one responsible for me. When I get washed out of this opportunity in leadership, you're going to sit back and laugh. So there have been some other incidences, but that's one that comes to mind from a diversity perspective, where diversity is important. So here's some principles I taught my kids, or I preach to my kids. This is a fairly diverse audience from a gender and from an ethnic standpoint. Never be ashamed if someone wants to offer you an opportunity because of your diversity, however you want to define diversity. And somebody says, I want to give you this job because you are diverse. Say, thank you very much. Do not be ashamed. Here's when I want you to be ashamed. If once you accept the job and you're on the other side of the door and you're trying to use diversity to achieve, that doesn't work. Do you understand the subtle difference there? Once the opportunity is presented to you, then you got to compete like everybody else. You got to compete on, your knowledge, your ability, not the fact that you're a female. And that's something I've preached to my kids for a long time, and one of them paid attention to it, one of them didn't. But anyway, any other questions? I can answer questions in 15 minutes. Yes, ma'am.
Would you like to kind of explain the clear difference between a leader and a manager or supervisor?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So let's start with the simple one, a manager or a supervisor. The book says do X, Y, and Z, and you say do X, Y, and Z, and when you ask me as the manager or supervisor, why am I doing X, Y, and Z? It's because I say, well, the book says do X, Y, and Z. A leader, first of all, the book's going to be important, but our relationship and me guiding you, and I don't want to use the word leadership in my definition, but me guiding you, me caring for you in a professional way, me making sure that you can succeed. A leader, to me, a leader goes above and beyond what's required. A manager does what's required. A leader goes above and beyond what's required, especially a leader of people. I might have been able to be president of the United States one day. Who knows? I don't think I'm smart enough, even regardless of what Dr. Robinson says. But I've had a knock on my career for 45 years. We all have a basic personality makeup. Some people are kinder than others. Some people are more hyperactive than others. But, we all have a framework that I think is part of our DNA. And part of my framework is I care about people. I will go the extra mile to try to make you successful. I'm not, there's a term I'm not, corrosive, I'm not, I'm not one who doesn't have empathy and feelings. And I've had some performance evaluations who I have had bosses who aren't like me, and they say, Vince, you're just not tough enough. You gotta be tougher on those people, I've had fire people in my days, but normally it's 6 months after somebody else would have done it. So the point I'm making there is you're gonna have to develop your own leadership kind of style. And if you try to do it outside of your basic core personality, in my opinion, you'll fail. You can't be Vince one day and people are interacting with Vince, and all of a sudden I'm trying to come off as a hard ass, somebody I'm really not. They're going to see right through that. And so I was willing to take the lashes and say, if that's what I need to do to succeed when it's really not me, then I guess I just won't succeed. As my son told me one day, he said, Dad, if I have to do what you did to be successful, I just won't be successful. So I'm not willing to put in, those sacrifices of hour travel, relocation, etc. But that's his personality, it's different. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, I got the lights right in my eyes. Yes, sir.
My question is, how, as a leader, do you accommodate others when you have a particular vision that you've already set? And as a leader, I'm sure that you would want to go about that same vision that you saw. But how do you accommodate those who are around you, as well as being empathetic, but understanding that you're the leader and you have a set vision? How do you accommodate?
Sure. That's a great question. And so because I think you're mature enough to understand what I'm saying and I'm not attacking you, I think the flaw in your question is a 3-letter word. What was your question?
How do
Keep going. You'll get it.
How do I accommodate?
When you have a, let's say it again,
A set group of people?
is said 3 letters? That's the flaw. When your vision is set, that's the problem. You can have a vision, but it shouldn't be set, especially when you're leading 5, 10, 20 other people. Now, I'm not saying your vision should change, but set to me says inflexible. Set to me says I'm not willing to consider anyone else's thoughts, opinions, or vision. The best vision is a collaborative vision. So that's my point on set. So now I have to have a vision. Someone has to, have a roadmap on where we think we want to go. But if this person over here thinks that this alternative route might get us there quicker, cheaper, more faster, but we're not compromising my overall vision, then I have to be willing to say, thank you very much. So my point is collaborative leadership, not shutting people down just because it's not my idea, it's not the right idea. So that's why I'm sorry, I apologize, I'm using you as an example, but don't set yourself so in stone. I like this, I tell people also from a job perspective, never hold on to the branch with a death grip. Always hold on to the branch firmly but loosely, so that when the hurricane comes or the winds blow, you can let go and fly away. And I say that the same thing with our vision, with our thoughts. Don't be so firm and so set in my way or the highway. Otherwise, why do you even have people working with you and for you? You don't want people you're just going to tell what to do. A leader once said, when you're a good leader? When you're not a good leader, let me reverse that. Anybody heard this before? When you look behind you and there's nobody there. That's when you're not a good leader. You're a good leader when you look behind you and the team's behind you around you. Take one more. Yes, ma'am.
In your career, you've been forced to change. Why did you not choose to change before it was forced upon you?
Very conservative. Low risk taker. I mean, I'm being very, very honest. I feel extremely blessed and lucky. Again, my background, my vision when I got out of high school was to get a job, hopefully one day find the woman of my dreams, buy a house, have a couple of kids with a white picket fence, and that was life for me. Because that's all I had ever seen. And the environment I grew up in, nobody went to college, you know, a lot of times males weren't in the household, so I didn't have the privilege of understanding what the world was. So when I got my first job, I was just happy to have a job. And so therefore, I was a little risk averse when it came to changing. Plus, I was doing well. You know, I was being fairly compensated. I was happy to go to work, and I was growing and developing. Company closed down. I went to the next one. I was being fairly compensated, blah, 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 blah. So let me tell you a quick story. So that, in general, I've been a fairly conservative person from a career perspective my entire life. When I was in Kansas, my daughter was a junior in high school. My son, I think, was a sophomore. No, excuse me, my daughter was a junior in high school. My son was they're 3 years apart, so he was in 7th or 8th grade. And I got a call from a recruiter. And the recruiter says, hey, I got this great job for you in Miami, Florida. And I'm like, I don't change jobs, you know. My daughter's going to be a senior next year. I'm happy with my job. You know, my son's doing okay, blah, 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 blah. She knew something I didn't know. She knew that the company was getting ready to go through a major change. She called me again in a year's time and said, hey, I got that same job for you. I said, where do I sign? She knew more than I did, but it was my conservatism that really didn't allow me to do my due diligence and understand what was going on. I was so narrowly focused on that one particular job. Again, parlaying to networking. This same person actually became is there a female version of a mentor? No. She became a mentor of mine. She helped me acquire this new job. We actually became neighbors. I found out that her and her husband went to school together. To make a long story short, to this day, we're best of friends. And to this day, I'm pretty sure she helped my daughter get into Spelman College. I can't prove it, but she was on Spelman's board. So I'm sure she had something to do with it. So again, everything's intermingled. There's no channels of anything that I've talked to you about that are unique and separate. All of this life experiences I'm trying to share with you are intermingled. But so I'm not ashamed to say that I was conservative from a career perspective. For me, it worked out okay. I love to tell younger audiences today, you cannot duplicate what I have done. It can't be done. I don't necessarily believe in luck, but I do. I don't necessarily believe in fate, but I do. But what I do believe in is you can do a much better job of managing your career than I did, i.e. knowing when's the proper time to change, getting your college education, making the most out of your college education, not just coming here and going through the paces, learning, developing, networking. There's a lot of stuff that I learned much later in life that you have the opportunity to learn today. So with that, I really want to thank you for being a great audience. It was my pleasure to share anything with you, and if we have time, I'll be around, so if you have any one-on-one questions or comments you'd like to make, feel free. Thank you very much.
So I want to, can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So I want to thank Vince for a great presentation. I just wanted to give you some notes that I took away from it. One, if you're the smartest guy in the room, find a new room. Secondly, I need to get to know you better. So one of my 3-year goals is the next time we do that exercise, I would hope that all or most of the hands go up. So that's a little work I need to do. And then the third is that this is my 3rd year at JWU, but since there's not an opportunity in Wichita, Kansas, I'm just going to stay, if that's okay with you. On behalf of the College of Business, I'd like to present Mr. Berkeley with this Distinguished Visiting Professor Award. And again, thank you for all that you've given us today.
No problem. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you.
Okay. As you all know, when we have a distinguished visiting professor, we present an award. This year's DVP Scholarship awardee has distinguished herself as a top performer in the freshman class with a perfect GPA of 4.0. I never knew what that was like. She is a quick learner, a dedicated and hardworking student who has excelled in her academic studies. She has demonstrated leadership qualities by positively influencing her classmates. Her written and oral communication skills exemplify a high professional standard. She is an asset to the JWU community as an active member of the Accounting Society, Business Society, and Delta Phi Epsilon sorority. She has spent her first year working as a work-study student for the College of Business. In this position, she has helped to coordinate many events that have taken place at the Johnson campus, such as Shark Fest, DVP, Executive Series, the Women's Expo, and multiple other events. The 2019 DVP Scholarship is awarded to Ms. Logan Weaver. Okay, with that, I actually get to turn it over. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
So, along with the DVP scholarship, the College of Business also likes to recognize a number of other students within the college. And 2 years ago, we started a program with the freshmen. So it's this year's freshmen and this year's sophomores were the two first groups, the best ever and the most amazing. And then we also recognize the top performers from each program. So the names you're about to see and the individuals that are about to be recognized right now are the top performers from the freshman class, sophomore class, and then from the programs themselves. All right. All right, so from the sophomore class, the freshman class, this year's freshman class, most amazing, top performer, Brooke Hinkes.
Come on, Brooke! Come on, good. Here, hold the thing. Come on, smile pretty. There you go. Good job.
All right, and the top performer from the sophomore class Logan Weaver.
My adopted daughter. She's nervous. That's okay. You're surprised?
All right, the remaining recognition are for students within the programs. And I'm gonna just have all of the program top performers come down at once, all right? So for business administration, Sam Ho, class of 2020. Business studies, Taylor Garner, class of 2019. For corporate accounting and financial analysis, Tristan Floyd. For fashion merchandising and retailing, class of 2019, Brian Katz. He studied 2 years ago, officially recognized. Food and beverage entrepreneurship, Olivia Meeks, class of 19. And lastly, for management, Denier Weech. The slide is missing some, right? Because we also have marketing.
Thank you.
And the top performer in the marketing class is Rebecca Curtis. Come back up for a photo.
Oh, I gotta come up for a photo.
No, well,
Yeah,
all you.
all of you.
Stay
Oh, okay,
together.
okay, good. I was like, ooh.
Yes, we should. Tristan, you gotta slide it.
Kristen, slide back. Typical accounting.
If I look at the lens up there. All right, so before Dr. Robinson does his closing remarks, I just want to let everybody know that there is a reception outside following the closing remarks. So please stay around, network, build your network, and find out some more information about other people.
So thank you for your time and your attention. A couple of years ago, we started naming our freshman class. So we started with the best ever. Could you raise your hand if the best ever is? Okay, and then the most amazing, the next class we'll bring in, should we announce that here?
Yes.
Is the most outstanding. What we do is kind of identify you before you come in and try to keep that standard going through. The other thing is I want to have faculty stand up and be recognized. Thank you so much for what you do. I think that you've done an outstanding job with producing some of the best and brightest we will ever see. And to Mr. Berkeley's point, I really hope you stay in touch and tell us how great you're doing and all the wonderful things you've discovered. The other point I want to make is that this is 2 weeks left, right? And I encourage you to finish strong, just like you started strong, and good luck. As we said, there is a reception to follow, which I want to thank Cheryl, Colin, and the work study students. Cheryl's not here, but please, please, please thank her for putting together yet another great DVP Business School recognition ceremony. Thank you, and we'll see you. I'm broke.
Hey, good to see you. Congratulations, lady. Yeah, Shay, what's happening? This way.
cannot summarize that.
Number one, I love it.
I'm so glad I worked with this. Radio man? Yeah.
I can attest to that.
Yes, because we did that. You should take a Jane, wait. Okay, can we show off our little certificates?
Yes, we can.
We gotta, it has to be a full body or else we can't get it posted on the page.
Of course.